Once upon a time in Italy, two girls choking back tears begged for help to find their mother, who had gone for a walk in the forest and hadn't returned. Laura Ziliani had been missing for several hours, and she wasn't answering her phone. The daughters pleaded with anyone who had seen anything to come forward immediately. After all, in such cases, even the smallest clue could be the key to a rescue. Laura's body would be found only several months later, and as for what would happen to her daughters, find out in this video. Once upon a time in Italy. Laura Ziliani was a happy woman. Of course, 55 years old isn't exactly young, but Signora Laura could show many people in their 40s what it means to be in great shape. No excess weight, ironclad health, regular sports activities, and long walks in the fresh air. She seemed to be planning to live to at least 300. And why wouldn't she, when she had everything needed for it? Laura was not only healthy, but also wealthy. Inheriting from her husband, she and her daughters owned more than 3 million euros worth of real estate, most of which were rental properties in a resort area, providing a steady income. Laura's husband, Enrico Zani, died in 2012 in an avalanche. He was 53, Laura was 45, and although she mourned her beloved husband, her daughter Lucia recounts that he had a difficult character, and his words to his wife weren't always kind. But life went on, and Laura began anew. She wasn't in a rush to remarry, but she did have a steady companion with whom she could share not only a bed, but also other interests. Laura had 3 adult daughters: Silvia, 27 years old in 2021, Paola, the youngest at 19, and the already mentioned middle daughter Lucia, who was 25. Things weren't simple with her daughters. Lucia wasn't entirely healthy, having a slight developmental delay and requiring a guardian. The other 2 were fine, but their relationships with Laura were far from idyllic. Experts later said that despite being adults, one working as a physiotherapist and the other studying economics and working part-time in an office, the girls were immature and lacked self-confidence much like teenagers. Their relationship with their mother had always been strained, and after their father's death it deteriorated further. Laura spent much of her time caring for Lucia, the daughter with disabilities. Although everyone who knew her said she was a loving and caring mother to all 3 of her daughters, the other 2 gradually stopped seeing her as a mother. According to Silvia and Paola, Laura neither provided them with adequate financial support nor gave them enough attention, encouragement, or approval. They perceived her as constantly dissatisfied and judgmental. Silvia and Paola saw their mother as successful but cold, and they viewed themselves as unwanted daughters, or at least that's how they described it. Their resentment slowly turned into hatred, and this hatred extended to their maternal relatives, who, it must be said, also had complaints about the girls, considering them lazy and overly fixated on money. But nature abhors a vacuum, so when a family couldn't be built from blood relatives, the girls found a replacement. Or perhaps the replacement found them? It depends on how you look at it. Mirto, initially the boyfriend of one sister, soon became the boyfriend of both. As he recounted during the COVID quarantine, the 3 of them sat down at the table one day, and he confessed that he loved not only Silvia but also Paola. And everyone was fine with it. Mathematicians and engineers claim that a triangle is the most stable geometric shape. In life, this is rarely the case, but the Mirto-Silvia-Paola triangle proved to be quite strong. But let's start from the beginning. Mirto Milani was tall, handsome, educated and talented. Born into a family of musicians, flautists, he possessed a unique operatic voice that allowed him to sing falsetto, as well as perform arias as a bass, baritone, and tenor. He graduated from the conservatory and played classical guitar, tenor saxophone, and piano. He sang and played the organ at the city parish church. For a living he became a surveyor, but for his soul, he graduated from the Faculty of Psychological Sciences and even defended a dissertation on music and learning disorders, the meeting of 2 universes. And despite this outward prosperity, psychologists assessed Mirto, Silvia, and Paola in the same way, as insecure and psychologically immature individuals. Mirto, in particular, had failed to find his place, feeling like an outsider in his own family, and thus, like the girls, needed a refuge. This is how what experts later called not a sexual perversion, but an alternative family, a tightly knit, closed-off trio, was born. However, this trio soon turned criminal. After their father's death, Laura and her children moved to the nearby city of Brescia, where Lucia stayed with her mother. Meanwhile, Silvia and Paola returned to the family home in the village of Temu. Laura visited them regularly, Sociable and friendly, she maintained contact with old friends and visited her daughters whenever she could. On May 8, 2021, the girls invited her to celebrate Mother's Day, and the next day they planned to take old mattresses to the bulk waste collection point. But things took a dark turn. Laura disappeared. She went for a walk in the morning, enjoying the beautiful weather, but did not return at the agreed time and did not answer her phone. They waited and called until noon, after which Sylvia reported to the police and rescue services. The search involving 250 people began immediately. However, despite the exact location given by the daughters, they only found one of Laura's sneakers, and that wasn't right away. This was astonishing. Laura was an experienced instructor, healthy and full of energy, and knew the area like the back of her hand. Nothing should have gone wrong on this route. But the oddities didn't stop there. It turned out that Laura had left her GPS watch at home, something she never did before going for a walk. Moreover, her mobile phone was also left behind, not in the living room as the daughters had initially reported, but in the basement, wedged in a crack by the wall where there was no signal. The phone hadn't been used since the previous evening, although Laura usually liked to browse social media before bed. Overall, it seemed as if Laura didn't want to be found. Myrto even suggested that she might have decided to live a new life and ran away from her family. Or, worse, she might have incurred debts and was hiding from creditors, staging her own disappearance and planting her sneaker on the trail as a distraction. Despite these speculations, Paula and Sylvia, sobbing uncontrollably, continued to plead for help in finding their mother. The daughters told the searchers everything they knew, how their mother got up in the morning, where she sat, what she said, what she ate for breakfast, how she left, and where she went. Yet no one had seen her on the path to the mountains. In fact, since the evening of May 7th, no one except her relatives had seen Laura, although whenever she came to Tamu before, she always visited a friend. The behavior of the daughters, wiping dry eyes with their fists on camera, began to seem increasingly suspicious, but there was no evidence linking them to Laura's disappearance. For now, thought the police, who then considered Paula, Sylvia, and their shared fiancé as suspects in the murder. On August 8th, exactly 3 months after Laura's disappearance, her body was found near a swollen river after heavy rains, washed out from beneath the ground. She was only wearing underwear. A thorough examination was conducted, and the results showed no water in her lungs, indicating she hadn't drowned. Furthermore, the state of decomposition suggested the body had been placed in the water recently and had likely been kept in a dry, protected place beforehand. There were no visible signs of violence on the body, but its condition allowed for toxicological analysis, which revealed a significant dose of benzodiazepine in Laura's liver. The cause of death was identified as mild asphyxiation. In other words, Laura had been drugged to the point of immobility and then deprived of air, perhaps by having her nostrils blocked or a pillow placed over her face. Meanwhile, computers seized from the arrested trio revealed highly suspicious search queries, such as poisonous plants, the perfect crime, and, on Myrto's computer, how to kill a person. This raised more and more questions. Why didn't they even attempt to find the woman themselves if they knew where she had gone? Why did they erase information from their phones before handing them over for inspection? Why did they claim Laura left the house in the very jeans that the rescuers found in the forest, when DNA tests proved she had never worn them? The reason for resetting their phones did have an explanation. They were embarrassed about their intimate life, visits to swinger sites, and their threesome relationship. However, the fact that from the very first days of the search, the girls did not show the slightest concern in their conversations with each other, but instead congratulated each other on the inheritance and eagerly fantasized about how they would spend it was something they could not explain. On September 24th, the criminal trio was arrested and more interesting details continued to emerge. It turned out that Myrto's mother had moved into Laura's house the day after her disappearance and began managing her property as if her son were already married, to orphans no less, and to all three at once. Neighbors reported that before the disappearance, Myrto himself had even argued with Laura over how she managed her property. One friend revealed that Laura had confided in her. She was afraid of her daughters, and recently, after drinking some tea brewed by Sylvia, she slept for 2 days straight and still didn't feel well. Another friend added fuel to the fire, recounting that after the disappearance she invited the daughters to join the search for their mother, but they mysteriously declined. It even reached the point where the middle daughter, Lucia, asked investigators not to trust her sisters because they were mean, took after their father, often said terrible things to their mother, and always treated her poorly, despite being supported by her. And as if all of this weren't enough, it turned out that there were very vigilant neighbors in the world, and when Sylvia and Mirto went to throw away Laura's second sneaker in the weeds, they were being watched through binoculars. First to crack was the angel-voiced musician Mirto. Suffering from loneliness in his cell, he befriended a fellow inmate and spilled everything. The inmate had even warned him the day before to watch out for any bugs they might have planted. When the investigators let Mirto listen to the recorded conversation, he had no choice but to confess to them as well. Later, he had a nervous breakdown and was briefly hospitalized before returning to the cell. Next was Sylvia, and finally Paola gave in. The girls claim it all happened because they were convinced their mother wanted to kill them. Apparently they found caustic soda in the salt shaker, chlorine in the milk, felt unwell after eating jam, and even noticed some suspicious oil on the surface of the Nutella. When asked why they didn't go to the police, or at least preserve the suspicious substance as evidence, they had no reasonable answer. Mirto's version, dubbed Mommy the Killer, wasn't believed right away. Initially, they suspected him because he was always conveniently present during each poisoning episode. But in the end, Sylvia's fiancé and lover to both of them convinced them it had to be their mother. She wanted to get rid of her daughters, whom she had never loved, and they believed she had no other way to solve this problem. They were terrified and decided to save themselves. Escaping was their first option, but then they realized they couldn't leave helpless Lucia in the clutches of their malicious mother. That's when the plan was hatched, to act preemptively and kill her themselves. They meticulously worked out the details, subscribed to all the crime channels, formatted the newsletter on the perfect murder, and binge-watched series like Dexter and Breaking Bad from beginning to end. They thoroughly studied the effects of poisons, some options like mixing a sedative with alcohol. They even tried on themselves. Though mostly it was tested on Laura. Once they learned that ricin poison is made from the seeds of castor beans, they collected these seeds, ground them into powder, and sprayed them in her car. Failing to achieve the desired result, they continued their search. In addition to the attempt with castor beans, the trio tried to kill Laura Ziliani 5 more times, firstly by adding antifreeze to hot herbal tea, then with the same antifreeze but added to wine with a syringe through the cork. The third attempt was with a black forest cake. They left a large half for their beloved mother, significantly laced with castor oil, hoping that it would seem like she wanted to kill the children, accidentally mixed up the halves and poisoned herself. The fourth attempt involved a sedative. For many months every day, Sylvia, who worked in a nursing home and had access to medications, stole a drop from the bottles of benzodiazepine to secretly accumulate the necessary dose. Benzodiazepines are drugs from the group of central nervous system depressants, exerting a sedative, hypnotic effect. In non-medical use, they can be lethal. The main symptoms of poisoning include low blood pressure, slurred speech, a drunken gait, drowsiness, disturbances of consciousness, decreased reflexes, accelerated or excessively slowed heart rate, respiratory depression, and coma. They did indeed add a huge dose of this benzodiazepine to Laura's tea, but they didn't dare to go any further at that time. On that occasion, the woman slept for 36 hours straight, and then couldn't remember anything. Her friend suspected something was wrong, and even suggested to her that she might be being poisoned. But, unfortunately, the woman refused to believe that her daughters were capable of such a thing. It was April 16th, and then came May 8th, Mother's Day. The daughters invited Laura to celebrate, preparing her favorite muffins, adding a considerable dose of bromazepam to them. At first, everything was like the previous attempt. Laura suspected nothing, ate her muffin, and went to sleep. And the trio began to think about what to do next. Mirto wanted to undo everything again, but his indecision was sent back to where it came from. As the members of the criminal trio later recounted, they didn't want Laura to suffer. They wanted her to die in her sleep, and for everything to be quick and completely painless. But, as they felt, painlessness was not achieved. Paola, the youngest daughter, recalls,
"We thought that Mom wanted to harm us. The idea to kill her herself first came to Sylvia and Mirto. They locked themselves up, worked with chemical equipment. They told me about their plan only at the end of 2020. At first, I didn't want to participate. I would have preferred to die myself. But then I agreed. I don't know why Mom wanted to kill us. Maybe for financial reasons. as all our homes were jointly owned. And we thought that killing her and not letting anyone find out the truth would be the lesser evil for everyone, especially for our sister, Lucia. We put on long-sleeve shirts and trousers to avoid scratching ourselves, tight-fitting swimming caps, and 2 pairs of latex gloves each, all to leave no traces. Sylvia entered first about a minute before me. The lights were off, Sylvia was standing. Together we pounced on Mom. I had to hold her while she strangled her. Mom struggled so much that at one point I thought she broke my finger. I remember being on top of her while she convulsed. It felt so long, seemed eternal. I just wanted her to die as soon as possible. We chose this method because we believed it to be painless. At some point, I left the room because I felt sick, and Moto reassured me.
The eldest daughter, Sylvia, recounts,
It all started when we began to fear her. When I was killing my mother, I was 300% sure that she wanted to kill us. We were so frightened. I don't know why she wanted to do it. Maybe because I was in the way, or wanted to handle the property we inherited from my father differently. I was very attached to my mother. We did a lot together. But she didn't like Myrto. She thought he was lazy and said I should choose someone better. From August 2020, we started thinking about how to solve the problem, and we thought the best solution would be to kill my mother. We wanted to find a poison that couldn't be detected, or stage a fire. We collected herbs, tried to extract poisons from them. Myrto believed that we should stab Mom, but I didn't like that idea. Too much blood, it's hard to clean up. We thought about carbon monoxide, and then Myrto came up with the idea of suffocation. The idea with benzodiazepine was also from Myrto. I was against it, but he wanted everything to go calmly. We decided that when it was all over, we would never talk about it again. The subject should die with Laura. And I succeeded in this. For a long time, the night of the murder simply did not exist for me. At some point, I really believed that Mom just went for a walk and disappeared. On the day of the murder, everything was fine. She ate that damn muffin we made for her and fell asleep around 11:30 p.m. We slept for about an hour, then woke up and started arguing. Myrto wanted to give up on this monstrous idea, but at some point I gathered the courage. Paula entered Mom's room after me, and then we strangled her. I put a bag over her head, but it didn't work, and we had to strangle her with our hands. At some point, Myrto took over for me. It wasn't how we imagined it, not painless at all. We thought it would be faster. We wanted her not to feel anything. I hoped she wouldn't wake up. It's awful, but at that moment, it seemed to us the most humane thing to do.
Myrto, Sylvia's fiancé and Paola's lover, shares his story.
I always had a good relationship with Laura, although there were sometimes frictions. We set up my phone to listen in on her conversations, and we heard her and a friend discussing how to kill us. I told Sylvia, "Let's not do this. It's a stupid idea. Let's find some other solution." But she brushed me off. So I started asking Paola to help me convince Sylvia to stop. Paola went into Laura's room, where Sylvia already was. And after a while, I heard a muffled scream. I thought it was all over and wanted to run away. But then I decided that if I left, I would lose the girls. And they are my whole life. And I don't want to lose them. So I entered that room too. In the dim light, I saw Sylvia strangling her, and Paola holding her mother. Then I also put my hand on Laura's throat, because if I didn't do that, I would have been out of the group. Sylvia thought her mother might still be alive, so she put a plastic bag over her head, and then she put a ribbon with Velcro around her neck.
In case the body was found, so as not to suggest that the woman died at home, they took off her pajamas. They wrapped her arms and legs in plastic film to prevent them from moving, and loaded the body into the car. They planned their route to avoid cameras, and they put bags on her feet. The pre-prepared pit in the forest turned out to be too small, so Myrto had to dig another one, and to prevent animals from digging up the body, they filled it with a cement mixture. In court, Myrto said that he had doubts whether they buried Laura alive. Then the trio began to cover their tracks. They called Laura's mother on the phone, burned a set of clothes to make it look like the woman had left the house in them. They argued about whether to add the sneaker, and if so, where, and most importantly, who should decide this issue? At first glance, everything seems clear in this case. Everyone confessed, all testimonies match the evidence and examinations. On the other hand, who among the three is the main one? The sisters' lawyers claim that the murder wouldn't have happened if the girls hadn't listened to Murto, while Murto's lawyers say the opposite. The murder wouldn't have happened if they had listened. The court needed almost 100 pages of printed text to explain its decision. I won't bore you with quotes, I'll briefly outline the essence. In the tribunal's opinion, each of the three played an important role in the crime, and without any of them, it would have been impossible. All three acted in concert with each other, contributing to the formation of the criminal plan. Moreover, the very existence of this trio was the main reason for the murder. In the court's opinion, they killed not for money, or out of hatred for the victim, but to satisfy the ego of the group and prove their cohesion. It was as if they were playing a game. It was a symbolic murder, bright and provocative. They thought it was too banal to push Laura Ziliani off a cliff or stage an accident, drawing inspiration from TV series, resulting in a grotesque project, almost a parody, involving poisonous plants, infernal tablets, toxins used by the KGB, homemade videos, encrypted codes, acting, and simulated grief. The entire reckless trio received life sentences for their actions. At the time the video was released, the case had only been considered in the first instance, so there were chances for mitigating circumstances, and they would sit for a long time, but not indefinitely. There was still hope for the young. Maybe it's naive, but one wants to believe that the trio still realized something.
Right now, I can't say what came over us, but we talked about our mother as if she were a monster. We dehumanized her because we couldn't accept the thought that we were killing our mother. Honestly, I don't even know if there was a monster at all, or if we just lost our minds and made everything up.
When my parents came to visit me in the hospital, my father said to me, "I was ready to sell the house to prove your innocence. I thought you were innocent. I apologized to my parents for deceiving them."
I want to ask forgiveness from everyone. From the mother I killed, from my uncles, from my sister, from my grandmother, from all the people of Tamu. I understand that I caused everyone pain. I ask forgiveness for everything. Most of all, I regret what I did to my mother.
When I was working on this video, I kept thinking about another case. A girl named Erica, along with her boyfriend Omar, killed her mother and 11-year-old brother. Since both perpetrators were minors, they received shorter sentences. 16 years for Erica and 14 for Omar. When Erica was released from prison, she said to her friends,
"I miss my mom to death. I just want her to be here with me. I'm scared. I lost my mom and my brother. I still can't come to terms with the fact that they're gone."
Even though before saying these words, Erica had inflicted 40 stab wounds on her mother, and regarding Sylvia and Paula, experts and judges believe that there is no genuine repentance, one still wants to believe that they sincerely seek forgiveness. Well, or at least that one day they will think, "I miss my mom to death." Once upon a time, in Italy.